Hello and welcome to this presentation. My name is Anna Beitane and I am manager of online learning projects at Johann Schutte Institute of Political Studies at the University of Tartu. My today's presentation will be in English, so I hope it will not create too much inconvenience for those who are following presentation today. In my short presentation, I would like to talk about one of the key topics when we talk about instructional design, especially when we talk about instructional design of e-courses. In other words, I would like to talk about constructive alignment. And I would like to showcase you with some practical examples how exactly we apply this constructive alignment in our course. So before I go on with more practical and hands-on examples, I still would like to give you very brief theoretical context when it comes to what is constructive alignment. So when we talk about constructive alignment, probably I presume many of you heard the name of this scholar, John Biggs. He was one of the pioneers who conceptualized this framework. But what is exactly behind it? Well, according to Biggs, effective design of teaching and learning experiences could be achieved if we make sure that three key elements come together. This being learning outcomes, teaching methods, and assessment strategies. Probably you saw this kind of magic triangle in some of the didactic materials that you came across over the years. So this is, of course, Biggs' constructive alignment. And in order to achieve these constructive alignments, Biggs suggests that lectures should follow three basic steps. The first step is to start by defining clearly outlined desired learning outcomes that help students to achieve the necessary competences at the end of the course. The second step is related to finding and choosing teaching methods and activities that would support the achievement of desired learning outcomes. And the final step is to choose the design, to choose the right assessment that would evaluate whether students are able to achieve the desired competences at the end of the course or not. So it sounds very simple in theory, isn't it? But what exactly this constructive alignment has to do with today's topic of the presentation, and how can it be applied in the context of the MOOC? Well, I will try to showcase you these examples in the next couple of videos on the example of our MOOC. So the first step, according to Biggs, is to define very clearly what are our desired learning outcomes. In the case of our MOOC, we had 5 learning outcomes that directly corresponded to the number of study weeks, and they had a particular set of tasks and assessment that were necessary in order to achieve this learning outcome. So in a way, it could be argued that we try to design our MOOC with kind of a two-step approach. In the first part of the MOOC, and again, if we keep in mind Bloom's taxonomy, we try to introduce students to more theoretical toolbox and give them and develop their competences that could be identified in Bloom's taxonomy as remember and understand. Students could achieve these competences through completing self-tests, going through flashcards, and weekly quizzes. In the second part of the MOOC, we try to go a little bit more deeper. And if we look again at the Bloom's taxonomy, we try to develop such competences as apply, analyze, and evaluate. In that regard, students could achieve that through completing a bit more harder assignments such as written reflections and some peer learning activities. So by combining these two spectrums, or competences rather, in the Bloom's taxonomy, we wanted to ensure that students can get different bits and pieces of these competences. So let's now also go a little bit deeper and look specifically at the instructional design and what kind of logic did we use when we designed the learning activities. So if we have to really come up with the blueprint of our course, we were facing kind of a question. So how can we, on the one hand, design the activities that develop this theoretical knowledge and look at the competences of remember and understand, but on the other hand, we also come up with a bit more complicated assessment and make sure that students are also able to analyze, apply, and evaluate various trends that are related to the topic of our MOOC. So in this regard, I would argue that kind of a design of our MOOC could be kind of schematically sketched on the following visual. So on the one side of the frame, you could see the activities that fall under the competences of remember and understand. These type of activities include knowledge clips that are very brief in content and introduce students to theoretical knowledge, course glossary with the key terms, flashcards, quizzes, and H5P pop-up questions that students could go through while they watch the video. On the other side of the spectrum, we have activities that focus on competences of apply, analyze, and evaluate. And here we have in our course roundtable discussions with multiple speakers, we have expert interviews, we have written evaluated contributions, peer learning, and other activities. So in this regard, we can see that both of these kind of spectrums are taken into account and they form a coherent picture and coherent learning experience for students. Okay, so all of this sounds very nice when we talk in theory and perhaps a bit in practice, but what is the hard evidence that could give us a clue that this constructive alignment is really achieved? Well, probably the best way to find this out is through students' feedback. At the end of our MOOC, we organized a post-course survey that was filled out by the majority of participants in our MOOC, and we had around 1,000 participants in it. So the data that you can see here is quite reliable, we believe. So if we look at the feedback deeper and think about our desired outcomes and design of the course, what we can draw from students? Well, 65% of respondents strongly agreed that the course content and case studies were useful for them and helped them to address their relevant needs. 74% of respondents strongly agreed that the course objectives were consistent with the course as they were advertised. 68% of respondents strongly agreed that they have achieved learning objectives of the course, which is very important and something that any course author would like to see in the course survey. If we go further, 69% of respondents indicated that they strongly agree that the course increased their overall knowledge and understanding in the field. If we look at some other data from the post-course survey, we can also see that 71% of respondents agreed that the course materials were well organized and presented in sufficient depth, and the same number of participants also agreed that the assignment instructions, grading policy, and feedback system were very clear to them. So, considering these feedback from students, we would argue that our course achieved this constructive alignment successfully. So thank you for your attention, and if you would like to learn a little bit more about our MOOC, or you would like to have a look at the design of our Moodle page, then please feel free to follow the link and also QR code at the end of this video.